Commander Zekthor stood on the bridge of his warship, the Eternal Blade, and watched the stars pass by in silence. His silver armor reflected the soft blue lights of the control panels around him. He had lived for 237 years, and in all that time, he had never lost a battle. The Corinthian Empire stretched across 47 star systems, and Zekthor had personally conquered 12 of them. Victory was not just expected among his people. It was guaranteed. His second officer approached with careful steps. The young warrior's face showed respect and something else. Concern, perhaps. "Commander, we have received an urgent transmission from the Galactic Council." Zekthor turned his head slowly. The Galactic Council rarely contacted the Corinthian Empire directly. His people preferred to handle their own affairs. Display it. Quote, "Takes Lysis. Team 2. The holographic screen flickered to life, showing an elderly alien with blue skin and tired eyes. The counselor spoke quickly, his voice strained. "Commander Zekthor, we require your immediate assistance. An unknown hostile force has emerged on the outer rim. They have already consumed 3 colony worlds. We are calling it the Void Swarm. Nothing we send against them survives. We need the strength of the Corinthian military." Zekthor listened without emotion. His face remained calm and still. What makes this enemy different from others? Load. 80 made. 1. Reporting from others. Zekthor listened without emotion. The counselor hesitated. They adapt. Whatever weapons we use, they become immune to them within minutes. Our best scientists believe they are some form of biomechanical life. They learn from every encounter. "Commander, we are losing this war before it even begins." "I will come," Zekthor said simply. "Send coordinates." The counselor looked relieved, but then added something that made Zekthor pause. "There is one more thing. You will not be working alone. The humans have also agreed to send forces." Zekthor knew of humans, though he had never met one. They were a young species, barely 300 years into space travel. Their technology was primitive compared to Corinthian advancement. Their ships were small and poorly armed. Their soldiers had short lifespans and weak bodies. Why would the council ask for their help? "Understood," Zekthor replied, though he did not truly understand at all. 3 days later, the Eternal Blade arrived at the meeting point, a space station orbiting a dead moon. Zekthor stood in the docking bay, waiting to meet the human commander. His honor guard stood behind him, 12 warriors in perfect formation, their weapons gleaming. The human ship docked with a series of loud clangs and hissing air. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a dark blue uniform. He was short by Corinthian standards, perhaps only 6 feet tall. His hair was brown, cut close to his head, and he wore a relaxed smile that seemed completely out of place. "Commander Zekthor, I presume?" the human said, extending his hand. "Captain Jake Morrison, Human Alliance Navy. Good to finally meet you." Zekthor looked at the extended hand for a moment. Among Corinthians, warriors touched fists to show respect. This open palm gesture seemed vulnerable, almost foolish. Still, he had studied basic human customs. He reached out and grasped Jake's hand briefly. "Captain Morrison, I trust your journey was without incident." "Oh, we had a small reactor leak on the way here, but Danny and the crew patched it up. We're good to go." Jake grinned as if discussing something amusing rather than a critical ship malfunction. Behind Jake, more humans emerged from their ship. A woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight knot approached next. She carried herself with confidence, her eyes constantly scanning the docking bay. "Lieutenant Maya Collins, Tactical Officer," she introduced herself. "I've read about Corinthian battle tactics. Looking forward to seeing them in action." A younger male human followed, carrying equipment that looked heavy. He was barely more than a boy, perhaps 20 human years old. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, and he had a bright smile on his face. "Private Danny Cruz, ma'am. I mean, sir." I mean, Commander. The young soldier laughed at his own mistake. Zekthor observed them all with growing confusion. They seemed so casual, so undisciplined. They smiled and joked, as if they were not about to face an enemy that had destroyed entire worlds. Where was their battle focus? Where was their warrior spirit? The final human to emerge was an older woman wearing a white coat instead of military uniform. She had gray streaks in her brown hair and carried a data pad. Dr. Lisa Grant, xenobiologist. I'm here as a liaison to help our peoples work together. I've been studying Corinthian culture for 15 years. Welcome, Zekthor said, though his tone remained neutral. We should discuss battle strategy immediately. Time is critical. Jake nodded, his smile fading slightly. Agreed. Let's head to the briefing room. The briefing room was large and circular, with a holographic display in the center. Both Corinthian and human officers gathered around it. The display showed a star map, with several systems marked in red. This is the current situation, Maya began, manipulating the display with quick gestures. The void swarm appeared here, at Research Station Delta 9, 3 weeks ago. Within 48 hours, the entire station was consumed. Then they spread to the nearby colony on Epsilon Station. Population was 70,000. We received one distress call. Then, nothing. The hologram zoomed in, showing the path of destruction. They're moving in a pattern toward more populated systems. If they maintain current speed, they'll reach the inner colonies in 2 months. Earth will be in their path in 4 months. Zekthor studied the map with experienced eyes. What do we know about their capabilities? Jake pulled up footage from one of the last surviving scout ships. The screen filled with images that made even Zekthor's disciplined mind react with surprise. The creatures were unlike anything in Corinthian records. They seemed to be part organic, part machine. With writhing tentacles and glowing red cores, they moved through space without ships, their bodies somehow surviving the vacuum. When weapons fire hit them, their skin glowed and adapted, becoming resistant. Every weapon we've tried works exactly once, Maya explained. Plasma cannons, kinetic rounds, electromagnetic pulses. The first shot damages them. The second shot barely scratches them. By the third shot, they're completely immune. How is that possible? One of Zekthor's officers asked. We don't know, Lisa answered. Their biology defies our current understanding. They seem to share information instantly across their entire swarm. When one learns something, they all learn it. Zekthor considered this information carefully. In all his years of warfare, he had never faced an enemy like this. The Corinthian military relied on superior technology and overwhelming firepower. If the enemy could adapt to any weapon, what advantage did his forces have? Then we must strike hard and fast, Zekthor declared. We will use maximum force in the initial assault. Destroy them before they can adapt. Jake shook his head slowly. With respect, Commander, that's what the last 3 fleets tried. It doesn't work. You might kill a lot of them at first, but some always survive. And once they adapt, you're fighting with useless weapons. Then what do you suggest? Zekthor asked, feeling a strange sensation. Was it frustration? Corinthians were bred to be calm in all situations. Yet these humans challenged everything he knew about warfare. Jake exchanged glances with Maya and Danny. Then, he smiled that strange, relaxed smile again. We do what humans do best. We improvise. We change tactics constantly. We keep them guessing. We use weapons they've never seen before, including weapons that shouldn't even work as weapons. That is chaos, not strategy, Zekthor replied. Exactly, Maya said with a grin. Dr. Lisa leaned forward, her expression serious. Commander, I need you to understand something about humans. We've been fighting wars for our entire history. We've fought with sticks, stones, swords, guns, and nuclear weapons. We've fought in every environment imaginable, And we've fought each other for so long that we've learned to be unpredictable. It's kept us alive. Zekthor looked at each human face around the table. They seemed so confident, so certain, yet their ships were inferior. Their weapons were outdated. Their bodies were fragile. What did they know that his advanced civilization had missed? Very well, he said finally. We will coordinate our approach. My forces will provide the primary assault. Your forces will provide tactical support. Using your methods. Works for us, Jake agreed. When do we leave? Immediately. Another colony has sent a distress signal. We may still have time to save some of the population. The combined fleet departed within the hour. 12 Corinthian warships and 5 smaller human vessels jumped to hyperspace together. Inside the Eternal Blade, Zekthor stood in his command chamber, reviewing tactical data. A soft chime announced a visitor. Dr. Lisa Grant entered, carrying 2 cups of steaming liquid. I thought you might like to try human coffee, she said, offering him 1 cup. It's a stimulant drink. Helps us stay alert. Zekthor accepted it carefully, studying the dark liquid. He took a small sip. It was bitter and hot, quite unlike anything in Corinthian cuisine. It is acceptable. Lisa smiled and sat down without asking permission, another casual human behavior. Your behavior is unusual for warriors about to face a deadly enemy. We laugh because we're scared, Lisa said simply. Humans feel fear, Commander. Every one of us on those ships knows we might die. Jake has a daughter back on Earth. Maya has 2 brothers in the fleet. Danny just got engaged last month. We all have people we love, lives we want to return to. And we're terrified we won't make it back. This confused Zekthor even more. Then why do you smile? Why do you joke? Because fear is heavy, Lisa explained. If we carried it with us every moment, we'd break under the weight. So we laugh. We tell stories. We remind ourselves why we're fighting. It doesn't mean we're not taking this seriously. It means we're staying human. Zekthor sat down across from her. Corinthians do not feel fear. We removed that weakness from our genetics 10,000 years ago. Fear clouds judgment and slows reaction time. We are more effective without it. Lisa looked at him with something in her eyes. Was it pity? Perhaps. But fear also keeps us creative. When you're afraid, you look for every possible solution. You try things that logic says shouldn't work. You take risks that might save your life. We shall see, Zekthor said. But deep inside, in a part of himself he did not fully understand, he wondered if she might be right. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Epsilon Station. The sight that greeted them made even Zekthor's disciplined mind recoil. The colony was covered in a dark, pulsing mass. The void swarm had arrived first. Ships were scattered across the debris field, their hulls torn open and merged with organic material. The creatures moved among the wreckage like a living nightmare. Battle stations, Zekthor commanded. All ships, prepare to engage. Jake's voice came through the communication system, calm and steady. Human vessels, taking flanking positions. We'll keep them busy, Commander. You hit them hard. Acknowledged. The Corinthian warships moved into formation, their massive weapons charging with deadly energy. Zekthor raised his hand, watching the tactical display. Every ship was in position. Every weapon was ready. This was what Corinthians did best. Overwhelming force. Decisive victory. Fire, he commanded. The void lit up with destruction. Energy beams crossed the distance in milliseconds, slamming into the void swarm with devastating effect. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. Hundreds of creatures were vaporized instantly. The colony's surface was scorched by the assault. It was beautiful. Perfect. Deadly precision. For exactly 3 minutes, the Corinthian assault was completely effective. Then everything changed. The void swarm began to change before their eyes. The creatures that survived the first assault started glowing with a sickly green light. Their bodies shifted and morphed, their skin becoming reflective like mirrors. When the Corinthian ships fired their second volley, the energy beams scattered harmlessly off the creature's new armor. Some beams even reflected back toward the fleet. "Shields up," Zekthor commanded, his voice still calm but his mind racing. 3 minutes. That was all it took for them to adapt. Switch to kinetic weapons. The Corinthian warships opened fire with solid projectiles, massive rounds traveling at incredible speeds. They tore through the swarm, ripping apart dozens of creatures. But again, within minutes, the creatures adapted. Their bodies became softer, absorbing the impacts like thick gel. The rounds sank into them and were dissolved. "Commander, they're surrounding us," his tactical officer reported. The display showed thousands of creatures flowing through space like a living tide, moving to encircle the Corinthian formation. Zekthor calculated their options. Every weapon in the Corinthian arsenal was known, catalogued, predictable. If the enemy could adapt to anything they used, then the Corinthians had no advantage. For the first time in his long military career, he faced a problem that perfect tactics and superior technology could not solve. Then Jake's voice cut through the command channel, and Zekthor heard something he had never heard from a warrior before. The human captain was laughing, actually laughing while surrounded by deadly enemies. "Time to get creative, people," Jake announced to the human fleet. "Danny, remember that crazy idea you had about the cargo containers?" "Yes, sir," came the young Marine's excited reply. "Let's do it." Zekthor watched his tactical display in confusion as the human ships broke formation. They were not retreating, but they were not attacking in any way he recognized either. One human vessel, a small frigate called the Defiant Wind, accelerated directly into the thickest part of the swarm. What kind of suicidal tactic was this? But the ship did not fire its weapons. Instead, its cargo bay doors opened, and hundreds of metal containers shot out into space. They were simple storage boxes, the kind used to transport supplies. Why would they launch cargo at the enemy? The containers drifted into the swarm, and the creatures ignored them. They were not weapons, after all. Not from any advanced technology, but from simple, primitive, chemical reactions. The explosions released clouds of frozen gas that expanded rapidly, trapping dozens of creatures in crystallized ice. "Maya, your turn," Jake called out. Another human ship spun wildly, using its maneuvering thrusters to create a spiral pattern. At first, Zekthor thought the ship was damaged and out of control. Then he realized what they were doing. The ship was dragging a long cable behind it, and attached to that cable were hundreds of magnetic mining charges, the kind used to break apart asteroids. The cable whipped through the swarm like a massive whip, and the magnetic charges clung to the metallic parts of the creatures' bodies. Maya's voice was calm and professional. "Charges set. Detonating in 3, 2, 1. The explosions were smaller than military weapons, but they were effective. Creatures were torn apart or sent spinning into each other. The swarm tried to adapt, but how could they adapt to simple magnetism and basic explosives? These were not advanced weapons systems. They were tools, used in ways they were never designed for. "All ships, random tactics," Jake ordered. "Use anything and everything. Don't give them time to figure us out." The human vessels began what looked like complete chaos to Zekthor's trained eye. One ship vented its atmosphere into space, using the explosive decompression to push away attacking creatures. Another ship used its construction lasers, normally meant for repairs, as improvised cutting tools. A third ship simply rammed into a large cluster of enemies, its reinforced hull crushing them before pulling away. Danny's voice came through again, breathless and excited. "Commander Zekthor, your flagship is getting surrounded. We're coming to help. We can handle our own defense." Zekthor replied automatically. The Eternal Blade was the pride of the Corinthian fleet. It did not need help from tiny human vessels. With respect, sir, you really can't, Danny said, and his ship was already moving. The small human transport ship called the Ghost Runner accelerated toward the Eternal Blade. Creatures swarmed around Zekthor's flagship, their tentacles reaching for the hull, starting to tear through the armor. The Corinthian weapons were useless now, all of them adapted to by the swarm. The Ghost Runner did not slow down. It crashed into the side of the Eternal Blade, but not violently. The human pilot matched the flagship's speed perfectly, attaching with magnetic clamps. Then something completely unexpected happened. The humans started cutting through the Eternal Blade's hull. "What are you doing?" Zekthor demanded. "You are damaging my ship." Sorry about that, Commander," Danny replied cheerfully. "But we need to get inside to help you. Regular docking takes too long." The humans cut a hole through the outer hull and poured into the ship. Danny led a team of 20 Marines, all carrying weapons that looked ancient and primitive. They wore heavy armor covered in scorch marks and dents. As they ran through the corridors toward the outer sections where the creatures were breaking through, Danny was actually humming a tune. Zekthor left his command deck to see this for himself. He found the humans setting up defensive positions at a breach point, where void swarm creatures were forcing their way inside. The creatures oozed through the torn metal, their tentacles reaching for any living thing. Danny raised a weapon that looked like it was made from spare parts welded together. The humans opened fire, but not with energy weapons or advanced technology. They were using ballistic weapons, old-style guns that fired metal bullets. But the bullets were different. Some exploded on impact. Some released acid. Some were just solid metal that punched holes through the creatures. And they kept switching between different types, never firing the same kind, twice in a row. One Marine ran forward with what looked like a farming tool, a large blade attached to a handle. He swung it at a creature's tentacle, severing it with the simple sharp edge. When the creature tried to grab him with another tentacle, a different Marine threw a glass bottle filled with burning liquid. The bottle shattered, and the creature was engulfed in flames. Zekthor watched a human soldier lose his weapon. Instead of retreating, the man picked up a piece of broken metal from the floor and used it as a club, smashing it into the creature's glowing core. The creature died, and the human laughed, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. "Is this one tough or what?" the soldier yelled to his companions. Another Marine was injured, his left arm hanging useless at his side. But he kept fighting with his right hand, using a small pistol to shoot at any creature that got close to his wounded comrades. When he ran out of ammunition, he pulled out a knife and charged forward, screaming something about Earth and freedom. They were insane. They were reckless. They fought like every battle was their last, with no concern for their own safety. And somehow, impossibly, they were winning. The creatures could not adapt fast enough to the sheer variety of weapons and tactics. Fire, blades, bullets, acid, blunt objects, even bare hands. The humans used everything. Danny fought next to Zekthor, his young face covered in sweat and grime. A creature lunged at them both, and Danny did something that stopped Zekthor's breath. The young human threw himself between Zekthor and the attack, taking the hit meant for the Corinthian commander. The creature's tentacle pierced Danny's shoulder, drawing blood, but Danny just gritted his teeth and grabbed the tentacle with his bare hand. "Not today, ugly." He pulled a grenade from his belt with his other hand, shoved it into the creature's body, and pushed himself away. The explosion killed the creature and threw Danny against a wall. Zekthor rushed to the fallen human. "Why did you do that? Why would you sacrifice yourself for me? And Day, why would you sacrifice yourself? Why would you sacrifice yourself? And Day Trime. And Day Trime. Why would you sacrifice yourself? For me." Danny coughed, blood on his lips, but he still managed a weak smile. "Because we're on the same side, Commander. And besides, I'm not dead yet." Medical teams arrived, both human and Corinthian, working together to stabilize the wounded. The breach was sealed. The immediate threat was contained. But Zekthor stood in that damaged corridor, surrounded by human warriors who were celebrating their survival despite heavy injuries. And he felt something he could not name. The battle in space continued for another hour. The combined fleet managed to fight off the swarm, though not destroy it. The creatures eventually retreated, flowing away into deep space like a dark cloud. The humans had lost 3 ships. The Corinthians had lost 1, but it had been heavily damaged. Casualties on both sides were high. When the fighting ended, Jake invited Zekthor to the human flagship for a meeting. Zekthor found the human captain in the medical bay, visiting wounded crew members. Jake moved from bed to bed, talking to each person, remembering their names, asking about their families. "How do you do this?" Zekthor asked, when Jake finally turned to face him. "Do what?" "Lose so many and still smile. Care about each individual when logic says you should focus on the larger mission. Fight with such recklessness when calculation would be more efficient." Jake looked at him for a long moment. "Because they're not numbers to me, Commander. Every person on my ship matters. And we fight recklessly because we're not as strong as you. We can't win with pure power or perfect tactics. So we win with heart, with creativity, with the willingness to try anything, even if it seems crazy." "Your methods are effective," Zekthor admitted. "Without your intervention, my flagship would have been lost. And without your firepower at the start, we'd all be dead," Jake countered. "We're better together, Commander. Your strength and our adaptability. That's how we beat this thing." Maya joined them, carrying a data pad. Her face was serious. "We analyzed the swarm's retreat pattern. They're heading toward the inner colonies. Just as predicted. We managed to kill maybe 5% of their total numbers. At this rate, we can't stop them before they reach Earth. Then we need a new strategy," Zekthor said. "A way to destroy them all at once." "Lisa is working on that," Jake replied. "She thinks the swarm has some kind of central consciousness, a brain that coordinates them all. If we can find it and destroy it, the whole swarm might die." "That would require going deep into enemy territory," Zekthor observed. "A suicide mission." "Yeah," Jake agreed, his smile finally fading. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what was coming settling over them. Around them, medics worked to save lives. Engineers worked to repair ships. Soldiers rested and prepared for the next fight. Zekthor looked at these humans, these strange, fragile, impossible creatures. They were afraid. He could see it in their eyes, in the way their hands shook slightly when they thought no one was looking. But they did not let fear stop them. They faced it, acknowledged it, and kept moving forward anyway. For the first time in his long life, Zekthor wondered if his people had made a mistake 10,000 years ago. They had removed fear to make themselves better warriors, but perhaps in doing so, they had removed something else. Something these humans still had. Something that made them fight harder, care deeper, and never give up, even when logic said they should. He did not know the word for it yet, but he was beginning to learn. The combined fleet retreated to a hidden military base built inside a massive asteroid. The base was called Haven Station, and it served as a supply point far from any colony. Here, damaged ships could be repaired, and crews could rest before the next battle. Zekthor walked through the station's corridors, observing the humans and Corinthians working side by side. The two species were different in almost every way. Corinthians were tall and silver-skinned, moving with precise efficiency. Humans were shorter, varied in color, and moved with casual energy. Yet they were learning to work together. A Corinthian engineer showed a human technician how to repair a shield generator. A human cook taught Corinthian soldiers how to prepare food that actually had flavor, rather than just nutrients. Zekthor found Dr. Lisa Grant in the station's research center, surrounded by holographic displays showing data about the void swarm. She had been working for 3 days straight, barely sleeping. Her eyes were tired, but her mind was still sharp. "Commander." She greeted him. "Good timing. I think I've found something important." Stara. She manipulated the display, showing detailed scans of the swarm's behavior patterns. "Watch how they move. Every creature seems to know what every other creature knows. When one adapts to a weapon, they all adapt. That's not possible unless they're connected somehow." "A hive mind," Zekthor said. "We have encountered similar species before." "Yes, but this is different. Most hive minds have a clear structure. Queens, drones, workers. The void swarm seems to have one central intelligence controlling everything. I've been tracking their communications, and all signals lead back to one source, deep in their territory." The display zoomed out, showing a star map. A single red dot pulsed in the center of swarm-controlled space. That's where their consciousness is located. A massive bioship, bigger than any vessel we've ever seen. If we can destroy it, the entire swarm should collapse. How far into enemy territory? 6 days travel at maximum speed. Through dozens of swarm clusters. Any ship that goes there would face overwhelming odds. Zekthor studied the map carefully. "Probably," Lisa agreed. She sat down heavily, rubbing her tired eyes. "But it might be the only way to save billions of lives. Why do you do this?" Zekthor asked suddenly. "You are not a soldier. You are a scientist. You could have stayed on Earth, safe and comfortable. Yet you volunteer for this mission, knowing you might die. Why?" Lisa smiled sadly. "Because I have 3 grandchildren back on Earth. Katie is 7, Ben is 5, and little Emma just turned 3. I want them to grow up in a universe that's safe. If my death means they get to live, then it's a good trade." "That is not logical," Zekthor said. "You have value. Your knowledge, your experience. Your death would be a waste, maybe. But I'd rather die protecting them than live knowing I could have done something and didn't." She looked up at him. "Do you have family, Commander?" "Why? Corinthians do not have families as you understand them. We are bred in genetic facilities, trained from birth for specific roles. I have combat brothers and sisters. Warriors I have served with. But parents, children, grandparents? No. These concepts are foreign to us." "That's sad," Lisa said quietly. "It is efficient," Zekthor corrected. "Emotional attachments create weakness. They make soldiers hesitate, fear, loss, act irrationally. They also give soldiers something to fight for." Lisa countered. "When Jake charges into battle, he's not just following orders. He's protecting his daughter. When Maya risks her life, she's keeping her brothers safe. When Danny threw himself in front of that creature to save you, he wasn't thinking about military tactics. He was thinking that you matter." Zekthor was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "I wish to understand humans better. Will you teach me about fear?" Lisa looked surprised. "Because you all have it. Yet you all fight anyway. As a warrior, I need to understand my enemy. But I also need to understand my allies. And I am beginning to think that human fear is not the weakness I believed it to be." Lisa stood and walked to a small kitchen area, preparing 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Zekthor, who had grown to appreciate the bitter human drink. Then, she began to speak. "Fear is our oldest companion," she said. "Millions of years ago, when humans were weak creatures living in caves, fear kept us alive. It made us run from predators. It made us careful around fire. It taught us to plan for danger before it arrived. Fear is information, Commander. It tells you that something matters, that you could lose something valuable. But how do you function with it? How do you make decisions when your mind is full of worry about what might happen? We learn to live with it. Human children are taught from a young age that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. Every human soldier has felt fear. Every pilot. Every captain. Every general. But we train ourselves to use it. Fear sharpens our senses, makes us more alert, forces us to think of backup plans. Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger. Your people removed fear from your genetics. You made yourselves perfect warriors, free from doubt and hesitation. But you also made yourselves predictable. You always use the most logical tactic, the most efficient weapon, the optimal strategy. And against an enemy that adapts, predictable means vulnerable. Zekthor considered her words carefully. It was true that Corinthian tactics had failed against the swarm. Their perfect formations, their coordinated attacks, their standardized weapons, all useless because the enemy could predict and adapt to them. But humans, driven by fear and desperation, tried things that made no sense. And those senseless things worked. I want to learn your ways, Zekthor said. Teach me how to fight like a human. Jake Morrison overheard this request as he entered the research center. His face lit up with that characteristic human smile. Did I just hear the great Commander Zekthor ask for human combat training? Do not mock me, Captain. I am serious. I'm not mocking, Jake said, raising his hands. I think it's a great idea. Maya has been wanting to run some joint training exercises. Let's set it up. 2 days later, Zekthor found himself in Haven Station's training facility alongside a group of Corinthian warriors. Facing them were human marines, including Danny Cruz, who had recovered from his injuries with impressive speed. Human medical technology was less advanced, but their bodies seemed to heal with stubborn determination. Maya stood at the center of the training room. Okay, everyone. Today we're going to practice adaptive combat. The rules are simple. There are no rules. Use any weapon, any tactic, anything you can think of. The goal is to survive and complete the objective. She pointed to a holographic flag at the far end of the training area. Capture that flag. Both teams start at opposite ends. Go. The Corinthian team immediately formed a perfect tactical formation, moving forward in coordinated steps. They had trained for centuries in combat doctrine. Every warrior knew their role. They advanced like a machine, efficient and deadly. The human team scattered in what looked like chaos. Danny ran left. 2 others ran right, and Jake moved straight forward but in a zigzag pattern. They had no formation at all. The Corinthians reached the center of the training area first and took defensive positions. They were ready for the human assault, weapons aimed, angles calculated. Then Danny appeared from above. He had climbed up the walls using magnetic hand grips and dropped down from the ceiling, landing behind the Corinthian line. Surprise! He yelled, firing training rounds at the startled Corinthians. At the same moment, Maya emerged from a ventilation duct that the Corinthians had not considered an entry point. Jake came from the front, not attacking but throwing smoke grenades that filled the area with thick clouds. In the confusion, humans moved through the Corinthian formation like ghosts, reaching the flag and capturing it before the Corinthians could reorganize. Exercise over, Maya announced. Humans win. Round 2 in 5 minutes. Zekthor approached Jake, his expression serious. You did not fight with honor. You used deception and misdirection. Yep. Jake agreed cheerfully. In real combat, honor gets you killed. We fight to win, Commander. And if that means climbing through air ducts and dropping smoke bombs, then that's what we do. They ran the exercise 5 more times. Each time, the humans won. Not because they were stronger or faster, but because they were unpredictable. They used the environment in ways the Corinthians never considered. They changed tactics mid-fight. They took ridiculous risks that somehow paid off. On the 6th attempt, Zekthor tried something different. Instead of forming the perfect defensive position, he ordered his warriors to split up. Instead of waiting for the enemy to come to them, they moved aggressively. One Corinthian warrior even tried Danny's tactic, climbing the wall to get a height advantage. The humans still won, but barely. And afterward, Jake was grinning even wider than usual. "Now you're getting it," he said, clapping Zekthor on the shoulder, a gesture of friendliness that would have been insulting among Corinthians but somehow felt warm coming from a human. "Stop thinking like a commander for a minute. Start thinking like someone who's desperate, scared, and willing to try anything. But I am a commander. I cannot simply forget my training." "You don't forget it," Maya explained. "You add to it. Keep your tactical knowledge, but also allow yourself to improvise. Let your warriors use their own ideas, instead of just following doctrine." Over the next few days, the training continued. Corinthians learned to use improvised weapons. They practiced fighting in chaotic situations where perfect formations were impossible. They learned to adapt on the fly, to change plans when the original strategy failed, and Zekthor began to understand something profound. Human tactics worked not because they were better than Corinthian tactics, but because they were different. The humans had learned to fight in a universe that was unpredictable and dangerous. They had developed strategies for survival when logic said they should have died. One evening, Zekthor sat with Jake and Lisa in the station's observation deck, watching the stars through the massive windows. Danny joined them, carrying a bottle of something the humans called whiskey. "Want to try it, Commander?" Danny offered. "It's a traditional human drink. We share it with friends." Zekthor accepted a small glass. The liquid burned his throat, and he coughed, much to Danny's amusement. But there was something pleasant about it too, a warmth that spread through his chest. "To fallen warriors," Jake said, raising his glass. "May they find peace among the stars." "To fallen warriors," the others echoed, and Zekthor joined them, feeling a strange connection to these humans. "Commander," Danny said after a moment of comfortable silence, "can I ask you something? What's it like, not feeling fear? I mean, you're about to go on a suicide mission, same as us, but you don't seem worried at all." Zekthor thought about his answer carefully. "I feel nothing about the mission. I calculate the odds, plan the strategy, and execute. Whether I survive or die does not concern me. My purpose is to serve the Empire." "That sounds lonely," Lisa said softly. "Lonely? I do not understand. Being alone with your thoughts, never sharing your worries with others, never having someone to comfort you when things are hard. That's loneliness, Commander, and I think your people have been lonely for a very long time, even if you don't realize it." Zekthor wanted to deny it, but something in her words struck deep. He looked at the humans around him. Jake, who spoke of his daughter with such love. Maya, who carried pictures of her brothers. Danny, who had mentioned his fiancée was waiting for him back on Earth. Lisa, who fought for grandchildren she might never see again. They all had people they cared about. People who cared about them. They had connections, relationships, love. What did Corinthians have? Duty, honor, the Empire. But no one waiting at home specifically for them. No one who would cry if they died. They would be honored as fallen warriors, but not mourned as individuals. "Perhaps you are right," Zekthor admitted quietly. "Perhaps we have lost something important." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert. Maya's communication device beeped, and her face went pale as she read the message. "It's happening," she said. "The swarm is moving toward the inner colonies. They'll reach the first one in 36 hours. After that, it's a straight path to Earth." Jake stood immediately, his relaxed demeanor replaced by focused intensity. "Then, we're out of time. We need to launch the strike mission now." "Agreed," Zekthor said, rising to his feet. "Gather volunteers. We leave in 6 hours. Volunteers?" Danny laughed. "Commander, every human in this fleet will volunteer. That's just who we are." And he was right. Within an hour, over 200 humans and 100 Corinthians had volunteered for a mission they all knew was essentially suicide. They would travel deep into swarm territory, fight their way to the central consciousness, and destroy it. Most of them would not return. They all knew this. And they all came anyway. Zekthor stood before the assembled volunteers, looking at their faces. Human faces, full of emotion. Fear, yes, but also determination, courage, hope, and Corinthian faces, stoic and calm. But now, with something new. A spark of something they had learned from their human allies. "We go to battle," Zekthor announced. "Many of us will fall. But if we succeed, billions will live. That is worth any price." "Hell yeah, it is," Danny said loudly. And the other humans cheered. Even some of the Corinthians made sounds of agreement. Something that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. As they prepared to depart, Zekthor realized something had changed within him. He still did not feel fear, but he was beginning to understand what it meant to have something worth protecting. And in that understanding, he found something his people had been missing for 10,000 years. He found purpose beyond duty. He found meaning beyond survival. He found, perhaps, the first stirrings of what humans called heart. The Ghost Runner slipped through space like a shadow, its hull painted black to avoid detection. It was a human stealth ship, designed for reconnaissance missions, now carrying the most important strike team in the war. 50 soldiers filled its corridors, 20 humans and 30 Corinthians, volunteers who knew they were probably flying to their deaths. Zekthor stood in the command center next to Jake, watching the navigation display. They had been traveling for 5 days, moving through swarm territory, using every trick the humans knew. They kept their engines at minimum power, drifted when possible, and hid behind asteroids and debris fields. Several times, swarm scouts had passed nearby, close enough to see on sensors, but the small ship remained invisible. The tension was different from regular military operations. Corinthian warriors were trained to remain calm during any mission, but even they seemed affected by the long, silent journey. The humans dealt with stress in their own strange ways. Some played card games. Others told stories. Danny organized something called a talent show, where crew members performed songs or jokes to entertain each other. "It helps," Maya explained, when Zekthor questioned the logic of wasting time on entertainment. "Keeps our minds occupied. Stops us from thinking too much about what's waiting for us." On the 6th day, they entered the heart of swarm territory. The navigation display showed thousands of enemy signatures. Entire solar systems consumed by the void swarm, planets covered in organic material, moons converted into breeding grounds, space stations merged with living tissue. It was a nightmare landscape, and they were flying directly into its center. "There," Lisa said, pointing at the main screen. Through the darkness of space, they could see it. The central bioship was impossible to describe in simple terms. It was larger than some moons, a massive structure of organic and mechanical parts merged together. Tentacles, larger than cities, drifted around it. The surface pulsed with sickly, green light, and surrounding it were millions of swarm creatures, forming a living shield. "How are we supposed to get through that?" one of the Corinthian warriors asked, the first time any of them had openly questioned a mission. Jake studied the display carefully, his expression serious. "We create a distraction. 3 teams, 3 different entry points. We spread them out, make them choose where to focus their defense. That means splitting our already small force," Zekthor observed. "I know. But it's the only way. Team 1, I'll lead. We'll hit the northern approach. Team 2, Maya leads. You take the southern approach. Team 3, Zekthor leads. You go straight through the middle. The middle has the heaviest concentration of enemies," Zekthor said. "Yep. But it's also the shortest route to the central consciousness. While they're distracted by teams 1 and 2, your team might actually make it through." Zekthor understood the strategy. It was sound, if brutal. Two teams would sacrifice themselves to give the third team a chance. Who volunteers for the suicide teams? Every human hand went up. Even the injured ones, even those who could barely walk, raised their hands. Danny, his shoulder still bandaged from the previous battle, stood up. "I'll go with Captain Morrison's team." "Me too," said a female Marine named Kate Palmer. "Might as well go out with a bang." Zekthor felt something strange in his chest. Not pain, but something else. These humans were so willing to die. They joked about it, smiled about it, volunteered for certain death without hesitation. And they did it not because they were fearless, but because they were terrified, and chose to fight anyway. "No," Zekthor said suddenly. "We all go together. One team. Hitting one entry point with everything we have." Jake looked surprised. "Commander, that's not tactically sound. We'd be putting all our resources in one place." "Yes, but we would also be together. And I have learned from you humans that sometimes the value of fighting side by side outweighs perfect tactics." A slow smile spread across Jake's face. "All right then. We do it your way. All of us. Straight down the middle. No holding back." Maya pulled up the detailed scans. "There's a weak point here, where the bioship's organic outer layer is thinnest. If we can breach it, we should be able to enter the internal structure. From there, Lisa's research suggests the central consciousness is located in the core, about 20 kilometers deep. 20 kilometers through hostile territory," one of the Corinthians said. "Impossible." "Probably," Jake agreed. "But we're doing it anyway." They prepared for the final assault. Humans checked their weapons, choosing from an eclectic mix of traditional firearms, energy weapons, improvised explosives, and close combat tools. Corinthians charged their advanced armor systems and calibrated their precision weapons. Both groups helped each other, sharing equipment and advice. Danny approached Zekthor, holding something in his hand. It was a small knife with a worn handle. "Commander, I want you to have this." "What is it?" "It was my grandfather's. He carried it through 2 wars. He gave it to me when I joined the military. Said it brought him luck." Danny pressed the knife into Zekthor's hand. "I figure you could use some luck where we're going. Why give this to me? You should keep it for yourself." Danny shrugged. "If I don't make it back, I want someone to remember me. And I think you're starting to understand what that means, to be remembered." Zekthor accepted the knife, feeling its weight. It was crude compared to Corinthian weapons, the blade slightly dull from years of use. But it represented something more than its function. It represented a human life, a connection between generations, a symbol of hope passed from grandfather to grandson to alien warrior. "I will remember you, Danny Cruz," Zekthor said. "I promise." The night before the assault, Jake organized what humans called a gathering. Everyone crowded into the ship's common area, sitting on the floor, on boxes, wherever they could fit. Someone produced bottles of alcohol. Someone else brought food. They shared stories, talked about their homes, showed pictures of loved ones. Lisa showed photos of her grandchildren. "This is Katie. She wants to be a scientist like her grandmother. And this is Ben. He's obsessed with dinosaurs. And Emma, my baby girl." Maya talked about her brothers, both serving in the fleet on different ships. "They don't know I'm on this mission. I didn't want them to worry." Jake spoke about his daughter, Sophie, who was 9 years old and living with her mother on Earth. "I promised I'd be home for her birthday next month." He laughed sadly. "Guess I'm going to break that promise." Danny talked about his fiancée, Rachel. "We were supposed to get married last month, but I got deployed. She said she'd wait for me. I just hope she knows how much I love her." The humans passed around the photos, each looking at these faces of people they would never meet. And as they did, Zekthor noticed something. They were crying. Tears ran down human faces, and they made no attempt to hide them. They shared their sadness, their fear, their love, openly and without shame. "Tell us about Crinthia," Jake said, turning to Zekthor. "What's your homeworld like?" Zekthor struggled to find words. "It is efficient. Cities are organized in perfect geometric patterns. Citizens work in assigned roles. There is no crime, no conflict, no chaos. Everything serves the Empire." "Sounds boring," Danny said, but his tone was gentle, not mocking. "Perhaps it is. I have never considered it before. We do not question our purpose. We simply fulfill it." "What would you do if you could do anything?" Lisa asked. No one had ever asked Zekthor such a question. Corinthians were bred for specific roles. The concept of choosing your own path was foreign, but he thought about the past weeks, about what he had learned from humans. "I think," he said slowly, "I would want to teach, to share what I have learned about courage, about fighting for something beyond orders, to help my people understand what we have been missing." "That's a good answer," Jake said quietly. The gathering continued late into the night, until finally people began to drift away to sleep. But before leaving, each human came to Zekthor and shook his hand or patted his shoulder. Danny hugged him, a gesture that startled Zekthor but felt strangely comforting. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Danny said, "I'm glad we met, Commander." "As am I." The assault began at dawn, though in space there was no true dawn. It was simply the time they had chosen. The Ghost Runner accelerated toward the massive bioship, its engines roaring to full power, abandoning stealth for speed. Immediately, the swarm reacted. Thousands of creatures detached from the bioship's surface, flowing toward the small ship like a dark tide. The Ghost Runner's weapons opened fire. But it was like shooting at an ocean. For every creature they destroyed, 10 more took its place. "Brace for impact," Jake announced calmly. "This is going to be rough." The ship crashed through the first wave of creatures, its reinforced hull smashing them aside. Alarms blared as tentacles wrapped around the hull, trying to tear it apart. The crew fired through opened ports, using every weapon they had. Explosives detonated against the ship's exterior, sacrificing armor to shake off attackers. They reached the bioship's surface and found the weak point Maya had identified. Jake piloted the Ghost Runner directly into it, the ship's nose tearing through organic material. They crashed into the interior, the ship's hull screaming under the stress. Emergency lights flickered. Systems failed. But they were inside. "Thanks for watching." And then were favors on. "With people, everyone out," Maya commanded. The strike team poured out of the damaged ship, finding themselves in a nightmare landscape. The interior of the bioship was like being inside a living creature. Walls pulsed with veins carrying glowing fluid. The floor was soft and warm. Structures that looked like organs hung from the ceiling. And everywhere, swarm creatures were emerging, alerted to the intrusion. "Forward," Zekthor ordered, taking point with a group of Corinthian warriors. Behind them, humans provided covering fire, their varied weapons keeping the swarm off balance. They fought through corridor after corridor, pushing deeper into the bioship. The creatures adapted to their weapons, but the team kept changing tactics. When energy weapons became ineffective, they switched to explosives. When explosives stopped working, they used fire. When fire was adapted to, they used freeze grenades. The humans' unpredictable arsenal proved valuable once again, but they were taking casualties. A Corinthian warrior fell, overwhelmed by tentacles. 2 human marines were dragged into side passages before anyone could help them. The team kept moving, because stopping meant dying. They reached a massive chamber, and Zekthor's breathing stopped. Before them was the central consciousness. It was impossible to describe properly. Imagine a brain the size of a building, pulsing with electricity, and connected to millions of organic cables. It glowed with malevolent intelligence, and Zekthor could feel its attention focusing on them. "That's it," Lisa said, her voice filled with awe and horror. "That's what's controlling everything." "Then we destroy it," Jake said, raising his weapon. But the chamber was protected. Thousands of swarm creatures poured in from every entrance, surrounding the strike team. They were trapped, outnumbered, and running low on ammunition. Zekthor looked at his companions. Jake, his uniform torn and bloody. Maya, limping from an injury but still fighting. Danny, his young face determined despite obvious pain. Lisa, a scientist who had chosen to be here, to fight for her grandchildren. And all the others, human and Corinthian, preparing for one last battle. For the first time in his existence, Zekthor felt something he could not name. Something that made his heart beat faster. Something that made his hands shake slightly. Something that whispered in his mind that he might never see another sunrise, never complete another mission, never exist again. And in that moment, with death closing in from all sides, in the heart of an alien bioship, light years from home, surrounded by enemies beyond counting, Zekthor finally understood. This was fear. He was afraid. The fear crashed over Zekthor like a physical force. His genetically perfect body, designed to never experience this emotion, suddenly flooded with sensations he had no training to handle. His heart raced. His breathing became rapid. His hands shook as he gripped his weapon. For 237 years, he had been a perfect warrior. Now, facing death in the center of an enemy stronghold, his body was betraying him. The void swarm creatures closed in from every direction. Their tentacles reached out, their glowing cores pulsed with hunger, and their adapted bodies were immune to most weapons the team carried. Zekthor tried to move, to issue commands, to fight. Then Danny was beside him, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. His breathing labored. The young human should have been terrified. He was terrified. Zekthor could see it in his eyes. But Danny was still moving, still fighting, still refusing to give up. "Commander," Danny shouted over the chaos of battle, "I need you to snap out of it. We need your head in the game." "I cannot," Zekthor admitted, the words feeling like poison in his mouth. "I am afraid. For the first time in my life, I feel fear, and I do not know how to fight with it." Danny grabbed Zekthor's shoulder, forcing the tall Corinthian to look at him. "Good. That means you're human now. Welcome to the club. Now, let me tell you a secret about fear. You don't fight without it. You fight with it. You use it." "How?" "It makes me weak." "No, it makes you alive. Fear means you have something to lose. Use that. Think about what happens if we fail here. The swarm reaches Earth. My Rachel never gets married. Lisa's grandchildren grow up in a war zone. Maya's brothers die fighting a losing battle. Your people keep fighting this thing until there's nothing left. That's what fear is showing you. That's why you have to move." Danny's words cut through the paralysis. Zekthor looked around the chamber at his team. They were all afraid. Every single human showed signs of terror. Sweating, shaking, wide eyes, rapid breathing. But they were still fighting. They felt the same fear that had frozen him, and they fought anyway. "Form up!" Zekthor suddenly roared, his voice cutting through the battle noise. The Corinthian discipline took over, and his warriors immediately responded, creating a defensive circle. "Humans, take position between our warriors. Mix your weapons with ours. Create chaos." Jake grinned, despite a bleeding lip. The team formed a tight defensive formation, humans and Corinthians alternating positions. When Corinthian energy weapons became ineffective against adapted creatures, humans with ballistic weapons stepped up. When explosives were neutralized, Corinthians switched to blade weapons. They covered each other, protected each other, fought as one unit instead of two separate species. Lisa worked frantically at a portable computer terminal, trying to access the central consciousness. I need time. The system is protected by biological firewalls. I need at least 5 minutes to break through. You've got it, Maya promised, firing at incoming creatures. We'll hold them. 5 minutes became an eternity. The swarm threw everything at them. Creatures that had adapted to every weapon ever used against them. Tentacles that could tear through armor. Acidic sprays that melted metal, but the defenders refused to break. When ammunition ran low, they used blade weapons. When those broke, they used pieces of debris, chunks of the bioship itself. Anything they could find. A Corinthian warrior named Korthan fell, his last act pushing a human soldier out of the path of a tentacle strike. The human, a Marine named Steve Palmer, screamed in grief and rage, emptying his weapon into the creature that killed his Corinthian friend. Danny fought beside Zekthor, the two of them covering each other's blind spots. When a creature grabbed Danny's leg, Zekthor used the knife Danny had given him, severing the tentacle with the crude but effective blade. When 3 creatures surrounded Zekthor, Danny threw himself between them, taking hits meant for the commander. I've got it, Lisa suddenly shouted. Access granted. I can initiate a cascade failure in the central consciousness. It will destroy this bioship and kill every connected swarm creature. Do it, Jake commanded. There's a problem, Lisa said, her voice breaking. Someone needs to stay here to maintain the connection. The swarm will try to shut it down. Someone has to manually keep the system overriding their defenses for 3 minutes, and there's no way to do it remotely. Silence fell over the defenders for a heartbeat. They all understood what that meant. Whoever stayed would die when the bioship collapsed. I'll do it, Zekthor said immediately. I am the commander. This is my responsibility. Like hell, Jake said. Your people need you alive, Commander. You're the one who can teach them what you've learned here. I'll stay. No, Maya interrupted. You have a daughter, Jake. I'll stay. I'll do it, Danny said quietly. I'm already injured. Won't last much longer anyway. They argued while fighting, each person trying to sacrifice themselves. And in that argument, Zekthor saw the fundamental truth about humans. They were not strong because they were fearless. They were strong because they chose to fight despite their fear. They chose to sacrifice themselves for others. They chose to care more about the mission, about their friends, about the future, than about their own survival. Enough, Zekthor said with authority. I will stay, and that is final. But not because I am the commander. Because I choose to. For 200 years, I followed orders. I fought because it was my purpose. Today, for the first time, I choose my own purpose. I choose to save lives. I choose to protect you all. He looked at Jake. Tell your daughter about me. Tell her that an alien learned how to be brave because of humans like her father. He looked at Danny. Tell your Rachel that you loved her to the very end. Tell her you were the bravest warrior I ever knew. He looked at Lisa. Tell your grandchildren that the universe is a better place because their grandmother fought for it. He looked at all of them, human and Corinthian alike. Now go. I will hold them here for 3 minutes. After that, you run. You get to your ship and you leave. That is an order. Commander, Danny started, tears running down his face. Go, Zekthor said firmly. And that is not a request. Jake grabbed Danny, physically dragging the young Marine away. Maya and Lisa herded the others toward the exit. The remaining Corinthian warriors hesitated, then followed, understanding that their commander had made his choice. But as they retreated, Danny broke free from Jake's grip. He ran back, grabbed Zekthor in a fierce hug, and pressed something into the Corinthian's hand. It was a photo. Rachel, Danny's fiancée, smiling at the camera. So you're not alone, Danny said, then ran back to the group before Zekthor could respond. Zekthor stood alone in the chamber, facing thousands of swarm creatures, holding the photo in one hand and the control terminal in the other. He activated the cascade failure sequence. The central consciousness began to pulse erratically, sensing its own destruction. The swarm creatures surged forward, trying to reach him. Zekthor fought with everything he had. He used his energy weapons until they were useless, then switched to blade weapons. When those broke, he used his fists. When creatures grabbed him, he tore them apart with bare hands. And all the while, he kept his other hand on the terminal, maintaining the connection. 1 minute passed. His armor was torn. Blood ran from multiple wounds, but the terminal stayed connected. 2 minutes. He was on his knees now, surrounded, using his body to shield the terminal. Tentacles wrapped around his torso. Claws tore at his flesh. But he held on. 3 minutes. The terminal beeped. The cascade was complete. The central consciousness let out a psychic scream that echoed through the bioship. The swarm creatures froze, then began to collapse, their connection severed. Zekthor tried to stand, but his legs would not hold him. He fell. The photo of Rachel still clutched in his hand. The chamber began to crumble. As the bioship started its death throes, he had done it. The mission was complete. He was going to die here, and strangely, he was not afraid anymore. He had faced his fear, used it, overcome it. He had made a choice that mattered. He would be remembered. As the ceiling began to collapse, Zekthor heard something. Footsteps running toward him. Through his dimming vision, he saw a figure burst into the chamber. Danny, refusing to leave him behind. "You really thought we'd let you die alone?" Danny shouted, grabbing Zekthor under the arms. "Humans don't abandon their friends, Commander." More figures appeared. Jake, Maya, and 3 Corinthian warriors who had also refused to leave. Together, they lifted Zekthor and ran. The chamber exploded behind them. Corridors collapsed. The entire bioship was tearing itself apart. They reached the Ghost Runner. Danny and Jake carried Zekthor aboard, while Maya piloted. The ship's engines roared to life, and they blasted out of the dying bioship just as it imploded. Through the viewport, they watched as the massive structure collapsed in on itself, taking millions of swarm creatures with it. The explosion lit up space like a new star. And then, silence. "All swarm signatures are going dark," Maya reported, checking sensors. "Across all sectors. It's working. They're all dying." The remaining crew erupted in cheers, hugging each other, crying, laughing. They had won. They had actually won. Zekthor lay in the medical bay, his wounds being treated by both human and Corinthian doctors. Danny sat beside him, his own injuries bandaged. "You came back for me," Zekthor said weakly. "Why?" New. "Because you're one of us now," Danny replied simply. "You felt fear, and fought anyway. That makes you human, in all the ways that matter." Jake entered the medical bay, his face showing exhaustion and relief. "We just received word from the fleet. The swarm has collapsed. Every single creature, across dozens of systems, just stopped. We did it, Commander. We saved billions of lives. At great cost," Zekthor replied, thinking of all those who had fallen. "Yeah," Jake agreed quietly. "War always costs. But we remember them. Every single one. That's what makes the sacrifice meaningful." 3 weeks later, Zekthor stood in a memorial hall on Haven Station. Names were carved into the wall. Human names and Corinthian names, side by side. Warriors who had fallen throughout the campaign. He found Danny's name there among them. Wait. Danny's name? Zekthor turned, confused, and saw Danny walking toward him, very much alive, grinning as always. "Surprised, Commander? You didn't really think I was going to kick it that easily, did you? I saw your name on the memorial. That's for my cousin, also named Danny. He was on one of the ships that didn't make it back. But I'm still here, still annoying everyone with my bad jokes. Zekthor felt something that might have been relief, might have been joy. Emotions were still new to him, still difficult to name. The memorial service was attended by both species. Humans and Corinthians stood together, sharing stories of the fallen. Jake spoke about his crew members, with tears in his eyes. A Corinthian commander spoke about warriors who had learned humanity from their human allies. When it was Zekthor's turn to speak, he approached the memorial with slow steps. He placed his hand on the wall, feeling the carved names beneath his fingers. I was taught that fear was weakness, he began, his voice carrying through the silent hall. That perfect warriors feel nothing, hesitate at nothing, sacrifice everything for duty. But I learned something fighting alongside humans. Fear is not weakness. Fear is what makes us cherish life. What makes us fight harder, to protect what matters. What makes sacrifice meaningful, rather than automatic. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I felt fear, for the first time, fighting alongside humanity. And in that fear, I found courage I never knew existed. The courage to choose, rather than simply obey. The courage to care about individual lives rather than just the mission. The courage to admit that survival matters. That love matters. That connection matters. He turned to face the assembled crowd. The warriors whose names are on this wall died so that others might live. They were afraid, but they fought anyway. They knew the cost, but they paid it willingly. They are the truest warriors I have ever known. He pulled out Danny's grandfather's knife, the one he had carried through the final battle. This blade was carried by generations of a human family. It represents continuity, memory, love, passed from one person to another. I propose that we create something similar, a memorial that combines Corinthian precision with human heart. A place where both our peoples can remember those who sacrificed everything. The proposal was accepted. In the following months, a grand memorial was constructed, visible from space, bearing the names of every being who fell in the war against the Void Swarm. Zekthor returned to Corinthia. But he was different. He brought with him ideas that challenged 10,000 years of tradition. He proposed reintroducing emotional capacity to Corinthian genetics. He suggested teaching warriors about fear, about choice, about fighting for reasons beyond duty. Many opposed him. But others, those who had fought alongside humans, supported him. Slowly, change began. Zekthor kept Danny's knife on his desk, a reminder of the day he learned what it meant to be truly alive. When asked about it, he would tell the story of a young human marine who taught an ancient warrior that being afraid was not weakness, but the beginning of wisdom. He stayed in contact with his human friends. Jake sent pictures of his daughter's birthday party, which he had made it home for, after all. Maya wrote about her brothers and their shared relief that the war was over. Lisa sent updates about her grandchildren growing up in a peaceful universe. And Danny, who visited whenever his ship passed through Corinthian space, continued to tell terrible jokes and make Zekthor do something Corinthians rarely did. He made him laugh. Years later, a young Corinthian warrior asked Zekthor about the war, about the Void Swarm, about the humans. What did you learn from them, Commander? The young warrior asked. Zekthor thought for a long moment, remembering that final battle, remembering the fear, remembering the choice. I learned, he said finally, that we are not strong because we feel nothing. We are strong when we feel everything and fight anyway. The humans taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. They taught me that we are not machines built to serve. We are beings capable of choosing our own purpose. And most importantly, they taught me that survival is not enough. We must live. We must love. We must remember. That is what makes existence meaningful. He picked up the old knife, turning it in his hands. I felt fear for the first time fighting alongside humanity. And that fear saved my life, saved countless others, and saved my soul. Never forget that lesson, young warrior. Never forget that being afraid means you have something worth protecting. And having something worth protecting means you have everything. The young warrior nodded, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. And somewhere across the stars, on a planet called Earth, a woman named Rachel Cruz looked up at the night sky and smiled. She wore a ring that Danny had given her when he finally came home, and she thought about the alien commander who had learned how to feel, how to fear, and how to be human. The war was over. The galaxy was at peace. And two species, once so different, had learned from each other that true strength comes not from perfection, but from embracing everything that makes life worth living, including fear, especially fear, because fear meant you were still alive. And being alive meant everything.